everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome to BioXplaining. The topic that we are going to talk about today is the structure of a bisexual flower. Okay, so let's begin. So talking about a flower is a specialized shoot in which the leaves are modified into the floral structures. So what we basically see is the leaves of the plant, they are modified into the various floral structures. And this is very common that the flower is definitely the most beautiful and the conspicuous part of a plant. And the most important function of a flower is reproduction. So when we say the most important function of a flower is reproduction, by default we refer to the sexual reproduction. Okay, so let us begin talking about the structure of a bisexual flower. Now first let us analyze this term, that is bisexual. When you look into the word, bi refers to two and sexual means here we are basically talking about the various sex organs of a flower, right? So a bisexual flower is a flower which is containing both the male parts as well as the female parts. This means that both the sex organs, the male as well as the female ones, are present in this type of a flower. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to talk about is the stalk of a flower. So what is the stalk of a flower? A stalk of a flower is also known as the pedicel. Now this is the part which basically connects the flower to the stem of the plant. So hence we can say that the stalk is the structure which supports the flower. Now, flowers can be categorized into two types based on whether the stalk is present or the stalk is absent. So in most of the flowers that we see, like say hibiscus, like say rose, these are all flowers containing stalk. But there are certain flowers which do not have stalks in them. These are the flowers that we call to be the sessile flowers. So sessile flowers are nothing but stalkless flowers, and we can have simple examples like rice, wheat, etc. The second part that we are concerned about here is the thalamus. So what is the thalamus? The thalamus, which is also known as the receptacle, is that part of a flower which basically supports all the other parts of the flower. We mean to say that all other floral parts, whatever, sepals, petals, male part, female part, whatever is present, all the parts are born on this thalamus. So this thalamus is basically like the stalk getting up, and then the stalk is enlarging like this in the form of a cup. So that is what we call to be the thalamus. Well, so now let us start discussing about the four whorls of a flower. So whenever you look into this word whorls, the whorl basically literally means concentric circles, right? So what are we going to discuss here? We are now going to discuss about the four concentric layers of the flower which are present. So let us get right. So the first whorl of a flower, what is it? That is known as the calyx. It is the outermost whorl. And as you can see in the image shown here, that the individual units of the calyx is what we call to be the sepals. So these are small structures, tiny structures, green in color, and they kind of resemble the leaf. So these are tiny green leaf-like structures. What is the function of the calyx? The function of the calyx is to enclose and protect the inner whorls of the flower, especially when the flower is in the bud stage, right? So this image here shows us that in the bud stage, the sepals play a very important role in protecting all the inner whorls of a flower. The second whorl that we are concerned about is known as the corolla. Collectively, it is known as the corolla. The individual units of the corolla is what we call to be the petals. So this part of the flower we all know, right? That these are, very brightly colored or variedly colored. So can you tell me that why is the petal so brightly colored in most of the flowers? I think you've guessed it correctly, that the petals are brightly colored so that they can attract the insects for pollination. So what is pollination? Pollination is a process by which the male gametes of the flower can be sent to the female gametes of the flower. We'll come to those details in our later videos, but for now, all we need to know is why are the petals so brightly colored? Because this acts like some kind of an instrument to attract the insects so that they can come and pollinate the flower. And the petals are large again for the same reason, so that they are very properly visible to the insects so that they can get attracted to it. Sometimes what happens is these sepals and the petals, that means the first whorl and the second whorl, they are not very distinct from each other. We cannot differentiate between them. So in these cases, we call it to be tepals. Collectively, we call it to be the perianth. That means the sepal and the petal, when we cannot differentiate between them, that's when we call them to be tepals. Now, obviously, tepals will be of two kinds. That is, one category will be they are going to resemble the sepals mostly, or the other category is they are going to resemble the petals. So when the tepal looks like a sepal, or rather the perianth looks like the sepal, which is green in color, then you can call it to be a sepaloid perianth. And the other category, that is when the perianth mostly looks like the petal, or it resembles the petal, means it is non-green or brightly colored, that is when you call it to be a petaloid perianth. So if we look into this diagram that has been shown, see the left hand side figure shows a very distinct calyx and corolla. The calyx is green in color and the corolla is bluish in color. But the right hand side image, what does it show us? It shows us perianth. That means we cannot differentiate between the sepals and the petals. So this diagram shows us what? That the perianth is kind of brightly colored. That means it is a petaloid perianth. And this right hand side one is a sepaloid perianth. That is, the entire structure is green in color. Okay, so we are done talking about the first whorl, which is the calyx. We are done talking about the second whorl, which is the corolla. Now let's talk about the third whorl of a flower, which is the Androecium, and that is the male part of the flower. The individual units of the Androecium is what we call to be the stamens, and the stamen has two parts to it. What are they? If you look into the diagram, this filament is what? It is the long thread-like structure, and the other part, that is the tip of the filament, has a bilobed structure which is known as the anther. Now, what is the function of this Androecium or the stamen? Their major function is to produce the male gametes. What are gametes? Gametes are the sex cells, meaning that these are the cells which are going to fuse together. The male gametes and the female gametes are going to fuse together. They are going to get fertilized, and then the zygote will be produced. So the male gametes in case of flowers are what we call to be the pollen grains. If we further look into the structure of the stamen, we'll find that the anther contains something called the pollen sacs. So these pollen sacs are the structures which actually contain the pollen grains, which are powdery substances that are produced. So this is about the third whorl of a flower, which is the male part. Now, let's get into the innermost whorl of the flower, which is the fourth whorl, the gynoecium, that is the female part. So the individual unit of the gynoecium is what we call to be pistil, or alternatively, we can also use the term carpel here. And what is the function? Goes without saying that the female part of a flower is going to produce the female gametes, the female sex cells. And what do we call the female sex cells in case of a flower? They are known as the ovules, or sometimes they are also called to be the eggs. So talking about the structure of the female part. If you look carefully into the diagram that has been shown, there are three distinct parts to the gynoecium, or rather to the pistil. The first part that we have is the stigma. The second part we have is the style. The third part we have is the ovary. So what is the function of the stigma? The stigma is a swollen knob-like structure, and from the male part, the pollen grains are being produced. So all the pollen grains come here and then they get deposited on the stigma. So we can say that the stigma, is like a receiver for those pollen grains. Once the pollen grains land here and it is confirmed that same species pollen grains have come, then what happens is the pollen grain grows a pollen tube and it grows downwards via the style. So what is the style? The style is this long slender part of the stigma. And ultimately, what happens to this pollen grain? They enter into the ovary, right? Inside the ovary, what do we have? Inside the ovary, we have the ovules. So what have we seen just now? Just now we have seen in the previous slide that the ovules are what we call to be the female gametes. So the pollen grain comes and it meets the ovules and then fertilization occurs inside. Great. So we are done with the 4 whorls of a flower. So now let us just have a very quick recap. What did we talk about? The first whorl is the calyx. Individual unit is the sepal. The second whorl is the corolla. The individual unit is the petal. Third whorl is the androecium, which is the male part of the flower, and the individual units are the stamens. The fourth whorl is the gynoecium, which is the female part of a flower, and the individual units are pistils, sometimes also known as carpels. So what we know is the first 2 whorls of the flower are not directly involved in fertilization. Or in other words, I can say that these 2 whorls are not directly producing the gametes which will help in the sexual reproduction. So what is the function of these 2 whorls? They are going to protect the further inner whorls. They are going to call the insects or other pollinators to help in the pollination process. So they are, basically helpers. So hence we call them to be the accessory whorls. And the third and the fourth whorl, that is the androecium and the gynoecium, these are the whorls which are directly involved in sexual reproduction. That means these are the whorls which produce the gametes. The androecium produces the pollen grains and the gynoecium produces the ovules. So these are known as the essential whorls of a flower. Ah, great. So we are done studying about the structure of a bisexual flower. So now can you try to identify all of these parts given? I hope you can. Let's see if we can do that together. So let's start from number 1. Which part is number 1 pointing to? Number 1 is the ovary. What is number 2? Number 2 is this long, slender part. So number 2 is the style. What is 3? 3 refers to the topmost part of the female part. So number 3 refers to the stigma. And number 4 is 1, 2, 3 taken together. That means I can label it as the pistil, or I can also call it to be the carpel. Let's see what's next. Where is 5 here? Okay, so 5 is pointing to this, the bilobed structure. So number 5 is the anther. What 6? 6 shows the slender, long part of the male part. So number 6 is the filament. What is 7? That is anther and the filament taken together. This is what we call to be the stamen of a flower, the male part. Whereas 8? This is simple. So 8, this is the petal of a flower. What's 9? Right, 9 is the green leafy structure. So 9 is the sepal of a flower. What's 10? So 10 is pointing inside the ovary and it is pointing to these small structures inside. So what does the ovary contain? The ovary contains the female gametes, which are the ovules. And what is 11? 11 is this part where all the other parts of the flower are present. So the 11th part is the receptacle, or we also call this to be the thalamus. Right? So I guess we have all understood the basics of the structure of a bisexual flower. Okay, so that's it. Please like, comment, and share the video with whoever you think might benefit from it. Also, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel BioXplaining. Let's keep learning. Meet you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.